Hello, welcome to the European Environment Agency. We are here for a live chat on industrial emissions and their cost on health. My name is Gülçin Karadeniz and I'm from the EEA's communications team. And I have the pleasure of being joined by my colleague Juan Calero, who works on industry and environment.
Hello everyone, and thank you for having me.
So it's a live chat, and if you have any questions to Juan, please do just write them down in the comment section, and hopefully we will have the opportunity to answer them directly here. Juan, we have recently published a briefing, so it's a short assessment that looks at air pollution and the cost of air pollution from industry. Can you say a little bit more about what this briefing was about?
Yes, so we have a methodology that has been developed by our European Topic Center on Health and Environment for many years on how to monetize, how to give a monetary value to pollution. So pollution is emitted and then it travels in the atmosphere. It ends up somewhere, and then it would affect a certain population, it would affect the environment. That will have an impact, so there will be higher mortality, there will be strokes, the crops yield will be lower, and so on. So that can be monetized, and then it will allow us to provide a number, to provide a significance of this impact without just talking about tons and kilos, which is more difficult to grasp. Then we get emissions information from the European Pollutant Release and Transfer Register, the EPR.
So it's a website that actually includes a lot of different information about different pollutants, different facilities.
Yeah, so this is published in the European Industrial Emissions Portal, and there is the heavy industry, very large industry. They send us, they submit information about the emissions they have, and then also waste transfers, and that we publish in the portal. And with this methodology, we allocate a cost per ton of these pollutants that we receive from industry, and therefore we can give an idea of the impact they have, and they have during the year.
Yeah, I mean it's a quite detailed registry, but as you said, it covers different things. But today we are focusing more on air pollution and its cost as well. And in many of our findings, actually, we do cover what kind of impacts it can have, like cardiovascular diseases. But the point of this briefing is this monetization. How much does it cost us? How much it costs our society? So maybe you could also discuss a little bit about why industry. What else do we know about industry? Because industry is not the only source of air pollution, and air pollution is not the only pollutant and other negative impacts caused by industry. So what do we know about industry? What do you work on?
Thanks. I mean, from industry, we are very lucky to get this data through the portal on emissions to air, water, and land, and other information. We also have information from their environmental permits. It's a sector that has historically polluted a lot, and then it's been targeted by legislation for many decades. So we have a wealth of data that we publish. We publish the data as such, and then we also publish 3 indicators on air emissions, on water emissions, and also on large combustion plants. These are large power plants, from which we get much more information. We get information on fuel use and emissions from 3 air pollutants.
And like what kind of plants? I mean, these are large power plants that use one type of fuel to produce.
Yes, so it's to produce energy.
Electricity,
either for other industry, so they are located in industry, or mainly as power plants, just to produce electricity that we all use
in our houses.
Yeah,
exactly.
And these are thermal power plants, so the data we get is for plants that use fossil fuel and biomass mainly. So we don't get information from other source of energy like renewable energy, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I think the focus is on large facilities. So how much of the picture does this assessment cover? I guess it does cover facilities beyond a certain capacity.
Indeed. So the ones that have to report information to us through this EPRTR are the biggest ones. So the people have in mind like these very large power plants, refineries, iron and steel works, the biggest pig and poultry farms also report information.
Poultry.
Pig and poultry.
Pig and poultry. Okay.
Yes, just the very large ones. And therefore we get a snapshot of heavy industry mainly, but of course it's not, and this is a message we also give, that is not the only thing that is polluting, and it's not. So this cost that we've published is just a snapshot of what is polluting from man-made activities. But there's nothing about there's also transport, there's also water, which we wouldn't cover here, and therefore industry is one of the main sectors.
Yeah,
but not the only one. Yeah.
So exactly, we will not focus on water in this discussion, but on air pollution. What kind of pollutants are we talking about? So what are the main pollutants that create this kind of concern?
So here is we are talking about particles. So particle is the main responsible for mortality caused by air pollution, and then there is also NOx and SO2, so nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides. Ammonia, and then we also, these are kind of the traditional pollutants that have always been targeted, and they were causing acid rain, they cause mortality directly on people. We also get information from organic pollutants, so these are dioxins. We also have heavy metals. They also have a strong impact on health, and also greenhouse gases. So therefore, we also have assessed the cost of climate change as well as part of this briefing.
Okay. Just for our live viewers, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section and we will forward them to Juan. And I think that my colleagues behind the scenes are sharing some of the links where you can find this massive amount of information, and it is quite detailed. For those experts working with that kind of data, it could be quite interesting. But we were talking about industrial pollutants, especially air pollution and the cost of it. And we were just saying that there is an improvement because we do this kind of assessment every, a certain number of years. Can you say a little bit more about what we can see in the latest assessment?
So in the latest assessment, we've covered the last decade, so from 2012 to 2021. The last decade for which we have data, of course. And then here we can say that the costs are still high, so they've been estimated to be in the range of hundreds of billions of euros that this impact cost.
Per year. This is the point that actually we are covering before, yes.
Per year, so it's quite high still, but we've seen a 30% decrease from the last year that we have in this decade that we've covered. So that means that, industry has been able to decrease their impact 30%. And this has been caused, the main sector that has decreased this impact has been the energy sector, so these power plants that I was talking about earlier. And that is not only driven by, pollution abatement policies, but also by climate change policies and just trends in the market, because it's mainly because of the switch from coal to natural gas in these power plants. Coal, it emits a lot of particles and sulfur dioxide. They are some of the two pollutants that have the highest cost per ton, and therefore replacing them with natural gas and of course renewable energy has meant that they've decreased their impact quite a lot. And then also the other sectors, there's been a decrease. So of course, there's light in the tunnel. There's been quite a good improvement. Also the Industrial Emissions Directive, that's the main legislation that covers them at European level. It has some requirements to implement best available techniques in their permits of these facilities, and therefore that's meant that there's been this quite sharp improvement during the decade, although there's still a big impact, of course.
So to kind of explain this thing, we are using less coal in energy generation.
Yes.
And that has improved air quality in terms of pollutants and hence the costs, which is actually quite positive news. So all these legislations, some of them you mentioned here, actually are paying off. EEA is working on a number of other related topics. Can you say a little bit more about what else we are doing when it comes to industry, but also some of these cost and air pollution and so on?
So a very good research that I can mention is the Zero Pollution Monitoring and Outlook Assessment. That was published in 2022, and the next version is going to publish at the end of the year. This covers the endpoints, environmental endpoints that get affected by pollution. So it covers ecosystems, it covers health, but also the sources. So there is a chapter on production and consumption, where there is industry, but there is also agriculture and transport. So it gives an overview of what has been happening in the last decades and how that has an impact on us and the environment, and how the future trends look. So the colleagues from the JRC, they've also provided an outlook part, which is it gives an overview of the future trends, what could happen according to current policy.
Yeah, in some ways it does make sense to look at the bigger pollution question as what starts in the air ends up in water. We have a question, but for our live viewers, if you have questions, please post them in the comments section. Despite our network problems, hopefully we will get through all of the questions. A question from Aisha: how big of a problem are coal-powered industrial plants still across Europe? So you did say that we are using less, but how big of a problem is it?
So, around 20 years ago, there were a huge problem with them. It was around a third of the energy we would use. It was produced by coal-fired power stations. Now that's decreased to half, so it is now around 15%. So of course, that's been, as I said, is like the market. Also, all of these plants, many of them were very old from the 60s, so at some point they close and they're not replaced by other coal plants. So now it's improved a lot, but of course, some of the biggest facilities we have in Europe, some of the ones that had the highest cost, according to our assessment, they are still coal plants, because there are still some which are still open and they are very big. And some which are in West and East Germany, and there is a plant in Poland, Belchatów, which is the biggest power plant in Europe, and is a coal-fired power plant. In the last couple of years, because of the war in Ukraine, of course, there's been an increase in the use of coal, because gas was very expensive, and therefore these plants that are still kind of half operated and so on, they've increased their capacity to provide for the electricity that is needed in society.
But in theory, with more renewable energy, hopefully the dependence on coal could go down further.
Yeah.
In terms of where our viewers can get additional information, can you recommend few sources for us besides the website that we mentioned? Is there anything that you would like to highlight?
So of course, I mean, we have the portal, as I said, that has all the information, and then of course there is a link in the portal where people can download the whole data, because the portal is just like a snapshot. There is a map viewer where people can check the facilities and the information, and also there are some trends. But some scientists, journalists, they want to, also general public, sometimes they want to check the nitty-gritty detail, then they can download the whole database. We have 3 indicators, as I said, which are also quite descriptive of what's going on in a nutshell for air and water emissions. And also I wanted to mention that this briefing is, of course, relatively short.
Yeah.
But then there is a technical note with all the details also. There is a link in the briefing with a link to that. Yeah. So that's also for some people who want to know much more about the methodology. It's all there in that technical note.
Yeah. Maybe one last question from my side. You did mention that some of the information was about climate change. So we do get carbon dioxide emissions and stuff also recorded. What can you see from the data that you have access to?
So from there we see, of course, that in this assessment we have CO2, but also shouldn't forget about methane and nitrous oxide, because they have a higher global warming, higher potential for climate change than CO2.
Warming,
the warming potential is higher for these two than for CO2 itself. And so we've seen that the relative importance of greenhouse gases in the pollutants that are emitted by these facilities has increased, meaning that they've decreased as well, but not at the same rate. So they are stabilizing more than for the other pollutants. So they are still quite relevant. And of course, the impacts that they cause are more at the global level. So then it's a big issue.
Yeah, yeah. You did mention that the data covers up to 2021. Are there any special trends that you can see in that period, like the COVID pandemic, for example?
The COVID pandemic had an impact in the sense that there was a decrease in 2020 in economic activity, and therefore there were some issues with supply of raw materials and so on. So there were some industries had to stop production for a part of 2020. So therefore we see a dip in this damage caused by these industries, and a dip, of course, in the emissions that they've reported. And then there's been a rebound effect in 2021 when the economic activity restarted. So that, of course, the rebound effects, in some cases, the impact they caused in 2021 is similar to 2019. So we saw that despite the decrease in 2020, then the level of economic activity was kind of similar to pre-pandemic levels.
Mm-hmm. We have just a few more minutes, but if you do have questions, now is your time to post them in the comment section if you have any questions for Juan. If not, you can also post them afterwards and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. One of the questions that we get quite often in these live chats is, as a citizen, what can I do? Is there anything that an ordinary citizen can do in terms of industrial emissions? It seems quite distant, but
Yes,
if anything.
Well, of course, all these facilities, they are very large, and therefore they are subject to very strict requirements when they are going to be established, when they are going to be built. And many citizens don't know that they have a lot of power in these cases, because there's always, for these very large projects, and environmental impact assessment. When they get the permit, there's also a consultation process. So there is a lot of times when they can intervene, they can establish their concern, they can raise concerns also to their competent authority, which can be regional or national depending on the country. Mm-hmm. So many times when these projects happen and then there isn't a public backlash until they start having an impact, there wasn't a lot of let's say public intervention at the construction phase. Mm-hmm. And it's because maybe lack of knowledge, maybe the citizens don't know they actually have a lot of power to intervene.
But they're also operational for decades. I mean, how long is the life of a power plant like that?
That's true. Some of these plants, they've been going on for decades, and it's around 40, 50 years that they can be operational. Coal and gas is similar, so many of them, they were built in the 60s and 70s, so they are reaching their final years. And of course, you can always replace part of it and continue operating. But that's when also it's important for policy to intervene, because if you build a few of new plants, and it doesn't need to be coal, it could be also gas, or there is also a lock-in effect by which there is a big investment and then they are operational for many decades. So if you build something now, it will continue operating until 2050 or 2060. So
whatever we invest in today will actually, future generations will most likely live with the consequences, positive or negative. And what about the consumption side? Can us consuming less energy have an impact?
That has a big impact as well. Of course, citizens can do their part, and it's quite relevant because a lot of these power plants, of course, they have an impact where they operate, but there's also the citizens through domestic combustion. Using their heating, basically, and electricity is one of the biggest demands that come from society for these plants.
For what we use at home. Yeah.
Indeed. And then through the last decades, there also be a decrease in in demand that has also have an improvement. So it's not only that there are less coal plants because they finished their lifetime and then they are replaced by something else. Also, the replacement, you don't need to replace it with as much power as before because the demand has increased.
Mm-hmm.
So there is less need to
replace
as before.
We have a question from Flavius Daniel. He says, good afternoon. Regarding pollution, I would like to ask a question. Is the process of composting plant residues exclusively in appropriate locations, of course, a risk factor on the environment, considering that it is not a technological process that also contains organic material? I don't know if you work exactly on the kind of setup of these industrial facilities. I know that you work on the emission side, what they actually release to the environment, but do you know anything about, can you say a few words about this composting plant residues?
So it's not, of course, my main area of expertise, but still, for the very large ones, we get some information in the portal, mm-hmm. because it's a biological process to treat waste, a certain type of waste. But we don't know. We only get information from the main activity, which is chemical or biological treatment of waste through such and such and such. So we don't know if it's a composting plant or not. Mm-hmm. Also, these plants, many of them are not very big, so therefore it could be that they are also out of the scope of what below the threshold that we get information from.
Okay. Any final remarks before we actually wrap up?
So I'd like to say that, of course, I mean, citizens, the more they know, the more power they have, and it's good that they access these resources and they see that, of course, pollution is not just a number, it's something that can affect them, it can affect their health, it can affect their surroundings, and therefore that has a cost on their lives and their quality of life. So it's not just a plant that is miles away or kilometers away from their location. And of course there's been an improvement, but now we need deeper transformation, because now we reach the point where marginal increases, they are no longer possible. We've done a lot, but to go to the next stage, we need to change gear, and the public and the public interests have a lot of power for these improvements.
Yeah. Very much. Thank you very much for your final words as well. Apologies for our technical issues, which is actually a first. It hasn't happened before, so hopefully it was not too disruptive for our live viewers. Thank you, Juan, and big thanks to having stayed with us. We will be having other live chats in coming weeks, so watch this space. Thank you again.